Dear students, let us continue our study in this paper entitled Forensic Chemistry and Explosives. And after studying what are explosives, what are the various types of explosive, let us now try to study the systematic examination of explosives and explosion residues in the laboratory using chemical techniques in this particular module. As you are aware, the explosion is of various types, and then when you collect these evidence, especially you will be able to see some components of sulfur, charcoal, gun cotton, nitroglycerin and various other chemicals which have been used to make these chemicals. And yes, these chemicals you can apply the knowledge of chemistry by simply doing some proper tests that we will discuss in this module. You can analyze and identify that what particular substance you have collected as evidence from the scene of explosion is actually what, and this can give you hint and provide sufficient base for constructing and telling yes, this bomb or this explosive was having this particular material for having that explosion. So let us begin with learning outcomes. In the learning outcomes, after studying this module, dear students, you shall be able to know why there is a need to examine explosives, know whether a suspected material is an explosive or not. You shall be able to learn the various tests for the analysis of the suspected material and identify the initiatory composition by spot test, identify the primary explosive by techniques like thin layer chromatography, and you should be able to comprehend the use of IR spectrophotometry in such cases. So let us begin with the question, why to examine explosives? And the answer is very simple. The explosive found at the scene of crime, they need to be examined to ascertain the cause of explosion. The explosion of a LPG cylinder is not produced because of the explosive material it contains, and often it is only an accident. But from forensic point of view, explosives which are of other type, however, are a cause of concern. Even in some cases, the LPG cylinder can be there as an intentional object for carrying out explosion. So you have to analyze and examine this from the forensic point of view. If the blast is due to explosive with malicious intentions, then it is necessary to identify whether a low level or a high explosive was used to produce that very particular blast. In order to identify the source of explosive or explosion, it is important to know its precise composition so as to assist the investigating and the law enforcement agencies. And that's what a role of forensic scientists like you will be. Whether a suspected material is an explosive or not, how do we determine this? A slight amount of the suspected substance is taken on the tip of a strip of paper. In the case of a liquid, the blotting paper or the filter paper, which can absorb this, is dipped into to absorb a fraction of the liquid, and then it is dried. The paper tip is then exposed to a candle flame, but you have to be cautious, it has to be very, very minute amount. If burning takes place violently, it is possibly an explosive substance. But when you are conducting this, you have to take proper security measures to carry out this test. The color of the flame can also tell you about the nature of the explosive, because the different ions, they produce different colors in the flame when they are present. So let us try to study in detail how to carry out the various tests for analysis of the suspected material. And let us begin with sulfur test, which is mainly a component in the gunpowder. The test for sulfur in suspect material is done to rule out or to find out whether it is gunpowder or not. So the suspected material is mixed with water and pyridine solvent is then added to it. As you add the pyridine solvent, the sulfur will get dissolved in it. After that, you have to filter the solution and evaporate the solvent. After evaporating the solvent, you will be left with residue, and in this distilled water is added if there is some sulfur which remains undissolved, and then the contents are acidified with dilute acetic acid. To this resulting solution, add a few drops of lead acetate solution. Lead acetate will combine with these sulfide ions, and immediately there will be formation of black color of lead sulfide, and this will indicate the presence of sulfur. To another portion of the extract, you can mix 2 to 3 drops of sodium nitroprusside, which is another reagent for testing sulfur. And as you add the sodium nitroprusside, a blue to violet color will specify the presence of sulfur. And you can do another test. Another part of this extract, you add silver nitrate. Silver nitrate will react and it will give you a black colored precipitate of silver sulfide. And this again will give the indication that yes, sulfur is present in the original substance that you have taken, extracted and further performed these tests. After the test of sulfur, let us try to find out whether charcoal is there or no. That is, we say this is the charcoal test for the gunpowder. The test for charcoal can be carried out by studying the color and non-reactivity, because the carbon here will be dark grey to black in color and it will be non-reactive in many other reagents. Coming to the test for gun cotton. The examination of gun cotton is based on the solubility test. Keep in mind that gun cotton will be insoluble in water, but it will be sparingly soluble in organic solvents like alcohol and completely soluble in acetone and certain esters. So, doing the solubility test will clearly give you idea about the presence of gun cotton. Let us now look how the test for nitroglycerin is done. Nitroglycerin, when it is heated with sulfuric acid and mercury, it will give the nitrogen dioxide. And nitrogen dioxide, it will be brown colored gas which will be coming out, and you can easily identify, yes, it is containing. But these are again the preliminary tests. Further tests are done for confirmations. So after these tests, let us now see some color tests which are used for the analysis of suspected material. The color tests which are carried out to identify various explosives, we have to first prepare some reagents and then we will be conducting out the test. Like, you can prepare this reagent by let us call this as a reagent A. And this reagent is prepared by dissolving 1 gram of diphenylamine, which can be abbreviated as DPA, in 10 ml of conc sulfuric acid. And now once this reagent is prepared, take 1 ml of the extract in another clean test tube. And when this one reagent, the reagent A, is prepared, how to carry out the test? Take 1 ml of the extract of the blast residue that you have got in another clean test tube, and then add 2 drops of this reagent A that you have prepared, and you can observe the different colors, and you can see in this table as shown here, if the color is blue to blue black, the possible explosive component may be nitroglycerine. If it is blue black, it can be nitrocellulose or NS. If it is blue, then it can be RDX or HMX. If there is no color, it is TNT, and if it is again blue, then it can be even PETN or tetryl. So you can see blue color is indicating so many explosives which will be possible. But then going into shades, but shades, if it is less concentration or more, it can be decisive. So further tests can be performed to confirm which particular explosive is there in that. Let us make another reagent, which is reagent B. Take 200 milligram crystals of thiamol, an organic compound, in a test tube, and add 0.3 ml of conc sulfuric acid. But keep in mind, this sulfuric acid should be of reagent grade, it should be nitrogen free, otherwise this also can give a false test. And how you have to perform further test? Add this reagent B that you have prepared to 1 ml of the sample extract, mix well, and then warm the test tube for 5 minutes at 100 degrees Celsius, and after that cool it for some time, and then add 5 to 10 milliliters of ethanol. Then observe the color. The RDX will give blue color, whereas HMX will result in olive color. So this is how in the earlier test both of these were giving same color blue, but here you are getting different colors. So this is how you can differentiate RDX from HMX. Let us prepare another reagent and call it as reagent C. Dissolve 1 gram of alpha naphthylamine in 100 ml of boiling distilled water, cool it, and then decant the colorless supernatant liquid which is above, and that has to be further mixed with 110 milliliters of glacial acetic acid. So this resulting will be the reagent C. Now, how you have to perform further test? Add 1 drop of reagent B, the earlier one, that is the thiamol reagent, and 2 drops of reagent C, which is the alpha naphthylamine reagent, and both of these have to be added to 1 ml of the extract of blast residue in a spot plate. The spot plate has grooves, and you can carry out and perform the test in minute quantities. So I repeat here, in this spot plate you have added 1 ml of extract, the blast residue extract, and then add 1 drop of reagent B followed by 2 drops of reagent C. Then observe what color you are getting, and as you can see in this table, if the color obtained is pink to red, the possible explosive will be nitroglycerine. If it is pink, it can be nitrocellulose or it can be NS. If it is pink to red, it can be RDX or tetryl or PETN, but if it is no color, it is TNT. So it's a combination of these tests that you keep on writing observation, and you will be able to keep on elaborating others and get the final conclusion that what explosive material that particular blast residue contains. Let us continue more tests making a reagent D, which is called as brucine reagent. And how it has to be prepared? Dissolve 5 gram of brucine sulfate in 100 ml of 33% acetic acid. To 1 ml of the sample extract, that is the extract of the blast residue, in a test tube add 2 drops of this reagent D and then observe the color for getting the conclusions. And as you can see in this table here, if it is blue to blue black, then the possible explosive is nitroglycerin. If it is orange to red, it can be nitrocellulose, it can be NS, it can be RDX, it can be PETN, it can be tetryl. But TNT will give no color, that is, it will not react and it will remain colorless. Let us make another reagent and call it as reagent E, and it is an alcoholic potassium hydroxide reagent. Dissolve 10 grams of potassium hydroxide in 100 ml of absolute alcohol. Add 1 ml of extract, that is the blast residue extract, to 2 to 3 drops of this reagent E in a clean test tube. The TNT gives purple red color, whereas tetryl will give red violet color, and that's how you can differentiate between these two. Moving to another reagent, which is reagent F. Reagent F is prepared by taking 0.1 grams of J acid in 100 ml of Kong sulfuric acid. Place a drop of the reagent F that you have prepared on a glass filter paper, followed by a drop of the test solution in acetone, and observe the color for getting conclusion. Also wash the filter paper under UV light. The yellow fluorescence will indicate it is RDX. So this is how you can perform all these chemical tests and come to the conclusion that which explosive material is there in the blast residue or the samples you have collected from the scene of explosion. After these color tests, let us move to one more very good technique, which is thin layer chromatography. Thin layer chromatography is actually based on the principle of chromatography, and it can separate the different components, and if there is only a single component, keeping the reference sample of that known, they will move the same distance in the TLC and they will have same RF value. So calculating their RF value or simply by examining by naked eye after you have developed it and they are visible, you can find out that yes, whether they are same or no. Because if you have the sample which you have collected and then other, you can keep on having different reference materials which you know, and then you can develop this TLC and come to conclusion that whether it is identical to this one or this one or this one. So thin layer chromatography in this context is done in order to have a confirmatory result, to be precise, for or as a confirmatory test for the explosives. The TLC place used are either 20 by 20 centimeters or 10 by 10, that hardly varies, whatever is available you can take them. Then silica gel G layer 250 micrometer thick is applied and these are made ready, so these plates are taken. TLC developing chamber is required where you will put the solvent and put these TLC and develop. Sprayer are required which will spray the reagent to make the colorless spot into colored, and capillary tubes for putting the spots. So these are the requirements that you will have to get ready before you perform this test. If we talk about reference, standards of high explosives will be used as control samples, and several solvent systems such as trichloroethylene with acetone in 4:1 ratio, chloroform is to acetone in 1:1 ratio, toluene to cyclohexane in 7:3 ratio, toluene to ethyl acetate in 9:1 ratio. These are the commonly used solvent combinations which are used to develop the chromatograms. And now how the procedure if we talk about? First, the pre-coated TLC plates need to be activated, and for doing that they are kept in air oven at temperature of about 110 degrees centigrade for 30 minutes. At this step, whatever extra volatile impurities and they are there or humidity, that all will be removed away. Then take 100 ml of eluent, that is the solvent combination which is appropriate, in the developing chamber for say 20x20 or 10x10, whatever TLC plate you have, corresponding developing chamber you can take, put the solvent, cover with a lid and let it be allowed to saturate for 30 minutes. After that, the concentrated extract of the sample needs to be made, and this is made in acetone and is spotted on a pre-coated TLC plate along with its reference standard high explosive or the control sample, and both of them are spotted. So one spot you will put with the help of TLC of the extract of the blast residue that you have got made up in acetone, a concentrated one, and if it is, you can put up 2 or 3 times the capillary on the same spot, and another spot will be for the known material, that is the reference or the control sample. And this is done by leaving a space of 2 centimeter from below the, so if this is a plate, you leave 2 centimeter and the spots will be put up one here and one here. And maintaining the minimum distance of 1.5 centimeters in between the 2 spots for application. The TLC plate is placed in the chamber known as developing chamber in upright direction, and it is then allowed to develop up to around 10 centimeters if it is a 20 centimeter plate, or 5 centimeter if it is a 10 centimeter plate, at least by the ascending method. That is, the solvent is moving from down to up, and along with the solvents these spots also are moving. So if they are different, their movement speed will be different, and if they are same, they will finally rest at the same, and that can be calculated properly with the help of RF. So then this plate is taken off and set aside for some time so that the eluent can get evaporated at the room temperature, or in simple terms, the solvent gets dried. So once the solvent on the TLC plate has dried, this can be subjected to various spraying reagents, and each spraying reagent will have a different color spot or sometimes same, which you will be getting. So you have to keep on noting down, and then with the reference value you can compare and find out whether it is the same or no. And for as a matter of fact, the sample that you are putting as a reference, if in all of them they are having same behavior, that is both the spots are having same distance travel, same color with each reagent that we will be using under UV light or with some spraying agents. If everything is same, then you are very sure that the sample that you have collected from blast residue with the one you have taken is a known. You can put the known sample to be of the RDX or TNT and so on, and if their behavior towards all spraying reagents and under UV light and RF is same, then you are 100% confident, yes, they are the same chemical materials. So these type of plates you can develop many, and each of them can be subjected to different spraying reagents. And keep on noting down the observation, what color you are visualizing. So once this solvent has dried, if this is subjected to the spraying reagent, which is 5% diphenylamine, that is DPA, in 95% ethanol solution, and if that is sprayed on TLC plate, but while spraying any spraying reagent, be cautious, don't put the spraying bottle very close, otherwise this coating will be removed, and so keep it at a distance and mildly spray and notice the color change. Another treatment you can do for the another TLC plate that you have developed is just put it under the UV light and observe the color. You can also spray sulfuric acid as a spraying reagent, and that can be actually done for the plate you have used for the UV light, but on a separate also. So the TLC plate, the chromatogram that you have developed after drying, then you spray it with sulfuric acid and then note the color which has been developed. Other spraying reagents which may be used are on other separate plates. You can spray one normal NaOH in ethanol over the TLC plate and then heat it for 100 degrees for 10 minutes in an air oven. And then it is cooled and sprayed with grease reagent. Grease reagent is formed by adding 0.25% of sulfanilic acid and 0.1% of alpha naphthylamine in 1:1 aqueous acetic acid, and then you can note the color. So now look at this table as shown here, and the colors that you have noted match with these. You can also match with the reference sample, as I told you, that is the very simplest thing. But yes, to gain knowledge and to be more clear what color will be expected for different explosive, you can take these references. As you can see in this table, the compound, if it is nitroglycerin, in the DPA spraying reagent there is no color developed. Under UV light there is a grey to grey green. When sprayed with sulfuric acid there is a blue to grey color obtained, and using grease reagent notice there is a pink color which is being obtained. Similar treatment if it is done on RDX, that is if your blast residue contain RDX. DPA reagent spraying will give no color. Under UV light it will appear grey. In the sulfuric acid as the spraying reagent it will be blue to grey. In grease reagent it will be appearing red. Similarly for PETN, DPA spraying will give no color. UV light will give you grey to grey green. Sulfuric acid will give you blue green, and grease reagent will give you red. For TNT, DPA reagent will give you orange brown color. So you can notice that this can be differentiated from others. And UV light will give you orange brown here. Sulfuric acid, after spraying with sulfuric acid, the color fades in this case. And the grease reagent is not giving pink or red, it is in this case giving you brown color. Coming to the tetryl explosive, under DPA it will appear brown, under UV light it will again appear brown, with sulfuric acid spraying it will be yellow to blue grey, and with grease reagent it is red color. And for HMX, grease reagent is going to give you red color. So these are the references, but as I told you, using these you already have the clue in your hand, that is the reference or the control sample that you have added, which will be behaving identically to all the tests or any parameter you are measuring if they are same. If they are separate, something or the other, you will find there will be difference. Another thing which is very important is noting the RF values. The RF value can be just calculated by measuring how much the spot has travelled. So that distance divided by the distance of the solvent front which has travelled. But don't forget to note down the solvent front, because it has to be done before drying the chromatogram. Once the chromatogram has dried, you will be not so clear about till where the solvent has moved. So the moment you take it out from the developing chamber, just note the level of solvent front where it has moved, and then after you have seen the spots under UV light or by using some spraying reagents, you can note the distance of the spot travel. So distance of the spot travel divided by the distance of the solvent front which is covered, that is going to give you the RF value. And calculating this in different solvent medium, you can check with the reference values. For example, as shown in this table, RDX when taken in chloroform and acetone 2:1 ratio solvent system has 0.72 as RF value, HMX has 0.35 and NC has 0.64 when it is developed in acetone is to methanol solvent system with 3:2 ratio. But again here these values, if you are getting slight plus minus, always the reference sample, and that needs to be compared, because in those conditions and how you are measuring, whether it is the top or it should be the center of the spot, but otherwise also there can be slight variation. Always rely on the reference sample, because the conditions that you are developing that are same in that very state, and they will have identical RF on whatever way in detail you are calculating the RF. Let us now try to understand how the identification of initiatory composition is done. The spot test for the identification of mercury fulminate and lead azide is carried out. For mercury fulminate, add an equal amount of vanadium pentoxide to the sample on a spot plate or the groove plate, and then add 1 drop of conc hydrochloric acid to run into the mixture. That is, you have to simply add 1 drop of conc HCl and observe the color. Mercury fulminate will produce a violet coloration. For lead azide, add 1 drop of freshly prepared ferric chloride solution to the sample dissolved in the saturated ammonium acetate solution. I repeat here, ammonium acetate solution, you add the blast residue. So that solution you have to add 1 drop of freshly prepared ferric chloride solution. If there is a blood red coloration, that will indicate azide or thiocyanate ions to be present. And in case of azide, the color is discharged by HCl after some time, but it will be retained if it is thiocyanate. Shown here in the table are some other RF values with other elements and the colors with other visualizers. So you can notice that mercury 2 ion or the lead 2 ion or the stiffnate or the fulminate or the azide, how they are having different RF values and having different corresponding colored spots with the other reagents, and these will be your reference to identify that what particular color and what RF value, and in case of RF values you can always put the known sample of these. That will be always helpful for confirming. For identification of primary explosives by TLC to get these RF values as shown in the table, you can use these solvent systems, that is methanol with 2 normal hydrochloric acid in 80:20 ratio, methanol with 2 normal hydrochloric acid and acetone in the ratio 65:15:10, acetone with conc ammonium hydroxide in 75:25% ratio. So all these can be used, and for getting these color spots as being shown in the table, you can use 2% aqueous potassium iodide as the spraying reagent, you can use 2% aqueous ferric chloride as the spraying reagent, and you can use 2% aqueous acidified sodium sulphide as the spraying reagent, and the results are in front of these in the form of this table, where all these mercury 2 or the lead 2 ions or the stiffnate, fulminate and azide are having different RF values and the colors. After this color test and the TLC test, let us move to the use of IR spectrophotometry. This also is a very reliable test. Comparison of an IR spectrum of an unknown compound with a reference file which you can get from library or from manuals of the IR spectra, it just requires the comparison of unknown compound to the known compound. The extracted filtrates occasionally comprise an unadulterated compound, and that is why IR fingerprint identification is found to be of value only in such cases where the extracts are fairly pure. So if it is a mixture of compounds, obviously if it is not pure, then it will have the IR values for all the chemical compounds that sample is containing. So that is why this test will be there. You have to really be very clear that your sample is quite pure, otherwise it will not be giving you the correct results. Or if it is a mixture, then you take the reference IR spectra of all of them and then try to analyze. That will require some experience. So I will suggest take the IR spectra of the known compounds and then try doing the analysis on the unknown and try mixing them so that you have vision of that even if it is impure, if you practice you can come to. But there is yes, color compiled with the color test and the TLC, definitely for sure you can say as a forensic scientist or as a forensic chemist that this blast residue contains this particular explosive. So if we talk about the IR spectrophotometry further, as you are aware, the IR spectrophotometer will have characteristic bands for the different functional groups which are contained in the chemical compounds which are a part of these explosives. So the band of nitro-aromatic compounds will give characteristic peaks at 1390 to 1320 centimeter inverse, and also at 1590 to 1510 centimeter inverse in the IR spectra. The nitro group, if it is available, which is commonly found in most of the explosives, its stretching vibrations for nitrate esters will show the IR peak at 1285 to 1270 centimeters and 1660 to 1640 centimeter inverse. And there will be two stretching vibrations in nitroamines which will show corresponding peaks at 1310 to 1270 centimeter inverse and 1590 to 1530 centimeters. So, this you can see is clearly listed in this table, that these are the bands which will give you the corresponding idea about whether it is the nitro-aromatic compound corresponding. You can get the nitro stretching vibration as well as the two stretching vibrations in the nitroamines. But then IR spectra, I again repeat here, you can compare with a known, and just compare like you are comparing two pictures with these band values in idea. So, correspondingly, if you think that yes, it is nitroglycerine, take a IR spectra of nitroglycerine, there the bands will be there, and correspondingly to that just compare and try to find out all these bands which are there in nitroglycerine reference sample, if they are there in your sample that you have collected from the scene of crime and then you have subjected it to IR, if that is matching, then yes, it is containing nitroglycerine. But yes, coupled with it's not a one test in isolation. As a forensic chemist or forensic scientist, you have to do all these tests and make the conclusion in totality. So, I am sure you will be able to now analyze these post-blast residue in a proper scientific manner and get the clue what the explosive substance is there in that residue that you have collected. So, dear students, let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. We know that the explosion may or may not be deliberate, but to identify whether the given material is an explosive or not, the various tests have to be carried out, and that is what we have studied in detail here. We studied charcoal test and the sulfur test in the suspect material, how it can be identified, and they will be found if the explosive material is gunpowder. Gun cotton, how that can be identified? By solubility test. It is insoluble in water, sparingly soluble in alcohol, and completely soluble in acetone and certain other esters as solvents. For the identification of mercury fulminate and lead azide, we can carry out the spot test as discussed. And we also studied how TLC can be carried out as a confirmatory test for various components of explosives by just putting the spot of the standard known explosive, carrying out, finding out the RF value, and also subjecting it to various spraying reagents where different colors are obtained. And if the two are matching in each and every of these tests and observation, they will be seen. Thank you.